Well, Ryan, it's been in theaters for just be the second full day.
Yeah.
Now, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the sequel to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which we both loved.
Mm.
The animation was incredible, and everyone can listen and read our reviews on that one. This one, about a year or so, year and a half, I think, later in terms of movie time, I think. And we get we kind of pick up where we left off after a slight flashback in terms of Spider-Gwen. We get a flashback of her side, and then we pick up with her reaching out to Miles across the multiverse, and then we jump into this movie. Man, it was going to be hard to top the first one.
Sure.
But man, they did okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be people who argue that this one's better. Although I think part of those arguments might be because how could it have been as good? How could it have been on par?
Yeah.
How do you recreate an experience that was unique in and of itself?
Yep.
Because they weren't going to be able to change stylistically really what they were doing. But the narrative in this one is quite different than what we had in the last film. And I think what makes this an exciting film for me is that, yes, it's different. The audio mix in this one's really quite fantastic. It's all over the place. So if you can see it in Dolby Digital or something, or high-end audio theater, do so. But I think that the core of this is it's back to some of the standard tropes of superheroes, which is isolation, acceptance, wanting to fit in with someone, even if that someone is a different version of yourself, I guess. So I think this film's very grounded in real human emotion, so that helps the kind of insanity of the visuals and the strange mix, and I don't know, everything about the kind of experimental aspects of the film, because it is. I mean, it is without question experimental, but I think it's kind of in that place where avant-garde meets mainstream, and it's a kind of a weird place, but.
Yeah, I remember we talked about the first one. This, it demonstrated that animation is a tool, and that you can use, and the fact that they use so many different animation styles and are inspired by so many different animation styles that are all unique to the characters that they're, and that's how you bring in all of these disparate characters and keep them true. Is to keep them the way. I mean, it's weird to keep them the way they were, and so they do that stylistically a lot as well. Yeah, you're right. A lot of people are going to say this one's better than the first one. I say it's apples and oranges. I thought the first film really was. It was a personal film about Miles, just period. About him. He's just coming to grips, and then this one. We blow up and we see that all the Spider-Men have done that. Tried to figure out where they fit, how they fit, why they're Spider-Man, and how to be Spider-Man. And that's the overarching thing of this. It's couched in this this Spider-Verse, which is still the easier way to say it than Miguel's humano-arachnid something, whatever it was, which did not sound as cool. But yeah, so this one kind of blows this kind of in a weird way. This is like the John Wick 2 to the John Wick 1.
Sure.
That we had, because John Wick was a man and his dog, as a boy and his powers, and now we've they blew up the world a little bit bigger in this than they did in John Wick 2.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's you've built a world. Now, what are you going to do with it?
yeah,
And in this case, it's a multi-dimensional world, but nonetheless, okay. Now that you've established that, what are you going to do with it?
yeah. And I don't want to spoil things for people that are not going to get to see it opening weekend. So, there are things we don't want to talk about. It's not a spoiler to say that we know there's a part 3 because they've already said there's a part 3. We knew this going in.
Yes.
So we'll be tying up this trilogy for that. At 2:20, this is the longest piece of animation that I can remember.
It would yes, it would contend. I don't know if it is the longest, or I don't, but I would say that I don't know that it feels particularly long.
No, it doesn't drag. I mean, but animation traditionally has been shorter just because it's so labor intensive.
Well, and I guess also because a lot of animation is aiming at a younger audience with limited attention
span.
span.
Yes.
Although I think we could argue that adults have limited attention spans these days too. So
that is true.
But yeah, I mean, and for those who aren't aware, this isn't, this is more of a Lord of the Rings ending rather than a natural ending, in that it's kind of ends in a place that suggests that there's something just right around the corner. It's a cliffhanger.
Yeah, and it in that way, it's because last night I finally took my wife to see Fast 10.
Yeah,
and it's very similar to the way Fast 10 ended. In terms of it reached a point where it chose to stop the film.
Yeah,
knowing that we're getting another film after it that's going to tie all this up, and they have similar run times, which is weird. So yeah, now I don't consider this a spoiler. I think that this film is also different. It's a bit of a head fake, and again, I know some people are going to complain about it. This film opens and for the first 10 minutes, I was like, is this a Miles Morales movie or is this a Gwen Stacy movie?
Well,
because the first 10 minutes is exclusively Gwen Stacy.
Yes.
And if you look at the remainder of the film, a large portion of it is about or through the eyes of Gwen Stacy.
Mm-hmm.
So now that Miles Morales, his name appears nowhere in the title, obviously. But after the first film, people, might presume that this is, about Miles Morales. These movies are about Miles Morales.
Sure.
But, or is it about Spider-Man? Is Gwen Stacy not going to be the central Spider-Man in the third movie? Will somebody else? Will it be more Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099?
Yeah.
Will we see more of it through his eyes? And if so, that's an interesting way to handle your trilogy.
Well, and it's the path that I would have had Guardians of the Galaxy take, in the sense that you get to explore one character that is part of a bigger structure, and then in the next film you get a different character that you're kind of tagging along with, and you still have that first character.
Yeah,
Miles Morales is still. I mean, after that first 10 minutes, he's still
a large. He's very front and center.
Together. They're mostly together. For a lot of the films, and when they're not, they're thinking about each other. Which there you go. So to me, Spider-Verse has always the freedom to jump around is part of what makes it so exciting. So yeah, it was a little weird at first, maybe. After the first 10 minutes is when we actually get I think the title credit or whatever, and then it's like, oh, so okay, now the movie. It's almost like we gave you a 10-minute short, and now we're giving you the movie. But it's all important stuff, and I think a lot of what Miles is going through, Gwen is going through. We just get to see it in a slightly different variation. We've got to keep in mind that these are different dimensions coming into contact with each other, and the similarities are completely intentional.
Yep.
And we learn more about that towards the end of this film, where we kind of reveal the crux of the situation, the lack of self-determination, I guess, that may exist. But don't worry about that. You'll figure that in the film. But
right.
So for me, what I thought was interesting to this film is they had they had a whole army of Spider-Men in that first film, and we don't get a lot of the same characters in this one. We're actually, beyond, Gwen and Miles. A lot of the other characters were not the same characters that we were hanging out with in the first film, and to me that's interesting as well, because there are so many versions to hang out with. That I thought that was actually a really intelligent thing, because now we get to meet a few more, and they're not fighting for screen time with the previous characters that we've already met and know something about. You do get a couple. There's one in particular that does pop up and is around with that has a role in this. But I mean, for the most part, it's a different film, and it stylistically is similar. But I mean, when you kind of break everything down, it's just they're not the same movie. They're really not even trying to be the same movie. They're building off of themes and things. So I mean, even it's even more different to me than I think John Wick 2 felt more like John Wick 1 than this feels like Into the Spider-Verse. But not in a bad way. I want to be perfectly clear about that. If you go in, I don't want people to go, oh well, if it's not like the first one, I don't want to see it. No, it's just that it's different. Right. And there's something kind of exciting about that, and I love there's the theme. We have the villain in this, and his whole motivation is he doesn't want to be the villain of the week, which I think is hilarious, because a lot of Marvel films have had issues with, they often have featured the villain of the week, or the month, or it's a very temporary thing. And so we have a villain in this film who's very self-aware of that and doesn't want to be that, wants to be, considered a real foe, wants to be, no, I'm a real villain. No,
I am your nemesis.
Yeah. You may not know it, but I am. And by the end of this film, you're going to believe me. Which is, I mean, that's actually pretty cool motivation, I mean, anyway, I think so anyway. I mean,
I know it is. It's an interesting take on why a villain does what they do.
Sure, it's not like he wants. I mean, partially, I'm sure he wants to take on, have world dominance and control, and that's all part of it as well. But the personal stake. I mean, they're not trying necessarily to destroy the world, and that it's more of a personal vendetta, and I think that works really pretty well.
Yeah, well, the best villains are always personal.
Yeah,
I mean, it's the single best villain in Marvel is Doctor Doom, and he personally hates Reed Richards, and by extension, anyone associated with Reed Richards. And that leads him to world domination. So
anyone who buys into the ideology. And so I think that's interesting. There's a lot that that I like about this film, and it can, it can be overwhelming, I guess, is how I would put it. But I think that you don't have to understand who every single one of these versions of Spider-Man is. You don't
Correct.
have to know everything about these characters. So my advice to people who are going in who say, well, I don't know who half these Spider-Men are, or what Earth and whatever 116 or what, or, whatever,
Right.
what Earth and the numbers mean. Don't worry about that. Don't even, just realize that there are different versions of Earth,
Mhm.
different versions of Spider-Man, and this movie will give you all that you really need to know about those to
Yep.
serve this film. Now, if you want to dive in and be a geek and say, "Oh gosh, look, this artist style is from this run of comics, and and then this style is this, and and their backstory is this," that I mean, there's that space as well.
Yeah.
Um, and there's
Oh yeah.
lots of Easter eggs and things floating around out there that, background characters and things that, are there to entertain the people who know that they're there, I guess, or that
Right.
will notice that they're there, but they're
The
not.
the people that notice them will get them, but if you don't,
Yes.
they don't
Yeah. It's
they don't
yeah.
detract anything if you
No.
don't
No.
know they're there.
Yeah. It's so. I mean, I think there's this kind of, you look at it and it's like, gosh, this is kind of a, there's so much that this is referencing, and I would say, well, yes and no. I think that really it's pretty a simplistic story told in kind of a complex visual crazy sort of way, but I mean, ultimately, again, it comes back to just mostly about, two teenagers who feel misunderstood, and are afraid of being rejected by the people they love and that love them. And I think that that's a very normal and accessible story for most people.
Yeah.
Not wanting to disappoint, but realizing that you're never going to be the person that they want you to be, but maybe what you are is just as good. But you're a teenager, so you can't make that, you can't, you just know you're different. And
Correct.
being different, you just think you'll never live up to expectation or whatnot. I think that's always an interesting thing, because here you have, superhero type characters who are going and fighting, injustice, and doing things that benefit society directly. And yet there's always this sense of, what if, my what do my parents think, or who the people that raised me, what do they think?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's more important. And I think that's true, for a lot of people. How do the people immediately around me feel about what I'm doing, rather than, am I actually improving the world? That's a secondary question.
Right.
They're
How
really
does
just
it affect
concerned.
my world, and then how does it affect
Yes,
the world?
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
And that
because your
comes that
world, you
comes
always
right.
have to deal with your own world first, which is a problem all Spider-Men have. But hey, look, if you enjoy what you're seeing and hearing on the Visually Stunning Movie Podcast, why not take a second to click subscribe if you're on YouTube, click follow wherever you're listening to us. Follow us on Twitter at VS Movie Podcast. Same over on Facebook. If you're on Instagram, it's Visually Stunning Movie Podcast. That would be awesome for us. We appreciate you listening. And now let's get back to the show. We talked about the number of Spider-Men.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. So one, let's talk about this. It is a multiversal story,
Yes.
and they're trying to keep multiverses intact, or separate universes intact. So in a way, it's similar to the theories that we've already laid out about the multiverse in Loki, the series. And in Loki, they call them incursions when there's too much interface between dimensions. And in this explains all the glitching for people that are
Yes.
outside their home dimensions, and those become, I can't remember what they call them here, but basically it's an incursion, and bad things can happen. But so all of these Spider-Men are here, and let me just say, I don't want to spoil anything. So many cameos in this movie.
Oh yeah.
And I don't want to say any more than that,
No.
because that would ruin it. But let's just say that every possible Spider-Man can be seen in this movie. And
Yeah,
you will see some that you recognize and some that you don't. And it's well played, and sad in a couple of places when they do it. But it is interesting to see those kind of things. Again, the Easter eggs. If you know certain things about certain Spider-Man, you'll catch on to those. The voice work here, they expand the voice cast. We actually get Oscar Isaac in full on Miguel O'Hara Spider-Man 2099 mode. But all the people. I mean, we get Karen Sony is. I love his Spider-Man. Dopinder. He's so great. Daniel Kaluuya is in it. His character is interesting. I was not familiar with his Spider-Man.
Yeah, well, and I do want to make something clear. I know that I didn't like. I know Spider-Man sort of.
Right.
I wouldn't say that I'm. I recognize more than like actually knowing things. So I know that there were a million things in this film that this is sort of film that someone out there who just loves Spider-Man is going to write some phenomenal graduate essay on the complexity of what they've done here.
I said people are going to write think pieces just on the animation integration.
Yes,
but there's a Spider-Man scholar out there that is going to do a serious breakdown of this Spider-Man and that Spider-Man and why this voice casting was perfect for this Spider-Man because of issues X, Y, and Z, and this actor's work here, and it's so there's right now there's a Spider-Man scholar that is just duding this thing up because there's a lot to break down.
And I hope it is a positive thing because sometimes we can be the worst part of watching a movie is our own expectations and whatnot. So I do hope there are going to be some people who probably don't like the film, probably because so many people. It feels like there's a lot of critical momentum behind this one as well, and so I think there may be people who know things and know things better that would have done things differently. They may take issue with things, but I hope that that's not the prevailing attitude. Because I'd like to think that for me this is one of the most liberating films I've seen in a long time, and it only further enhanced my disdain for Beau is Afraid, because it's doing similar things in that it's combining so many different genre styles and things and visual styles and crazy ideas. But this one is actually about something, and not just a story-wise, but about real feelings and things. It's not thumbing its nose at you or trying to be overly clever. It's just telling a story in a different way, a very traditional story in a different way. And I think that to me was very exciting.
Yeah. Let's kind of real quick. Let's talk about this in terms of comic book movies. One, I love the fact, and the next few things I say are all going to be connected, I swear. I love the fact that canon incidents are a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I likened it to Doctor Who's Fixed Points in Time.
Yeah.
Where no, these things have to happen, and they're gonna happen. But if they are altered, you get Oscar Isaac. You get Miguel trying to explain to Miles that. Let me find the wording that he. Oh yes, when you break canon, everything unravels. And I just couldn't help. I said, I'm just saying, looking at you, Marvel, Star Wars, because it's true. It's true. If you're going to run through your canon, you can't break it. You can't just go around and break, because then nothing stays together and everything falls apart. When we talk about regular films, the internal logic of a film, which is one of the things we love about John Wick. It's patently ridiculous, but its internal logic is constructed and adhered to in such a way that it all holds together.
Yeah.
And a lot of films in franchises and series are not. And again, I'm looking at you, Marvel. And because of that, I would like to point out that in my opinion, my humble opinion, Sony now officially rules the multiverse idea, because they have got it pinned down better. They have got it more organized with what looks like an actual plan for it moving forward than Marvel does.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's Sony themselves or if that's just the team that is working on. I think the first film was probably a risk for Sony, and it was a wait and see sort of proposition. And now they've had the opportunity to wait and see, and it did extremely well. And so I think that there's a certain amount of freedom that the writers and directors and animators have been given for this, which studios don't necessarily like to do.
Right.
But I think Sony's been in a position where how could things go worse for you, really?
Well, again, they kept Lord and Miller as the writers.
Yes.
And I please don't yell at us. I know that Marvel, Disney's Marvel, has input. They help. They have influence. Feige's name is on this film somewhere. I get it, but it's not theirs. Any more than Spider-Man Homecoming with Holland wasn't theirs. I think they had a lot more outsized influence in the next two live-action Spider-Man, because they were integrating it so much, and they convinced Sony that they were integrating it so much. But I think this animation, Marvel's not in that game. So this doesn't have to, it's not as subject to that kind of and I'm going to say outside influence, because Sony owns Spider-Man, not Marvel or not Disney. So, if Feige calls, that's outside influence.
Yeah.
So this is a little more insulated from that. But like I said, right now, as it stands, and looking forward to the third film, I think right now the leaders of the multiverse is Sony.
Yeah, and I would have a hard time trying to come up with an argument against that. It's simply because. I mean, Marvel could say, yeah, but we're dealing with more moving parts and et cetera, et cetera. And this film though just feels like it was better planned than
right. And say, yeah, Marvel can say, yeah, we've got more. They've got more balls in it. It's like, yes, which makes that connective tissue that much more important.
Yes,
and it's not there.
The fact that we, up until now, I don't even, and the Marvel universe is still so in flux at the moment, because Ant-Man was, Quantumania was supposed to answer everything, and it set a direction, but it didn't really, and we don't even know, because of outside issues, if that direction is going to be followed. I mean, there's a lot of questions there. Whereas I think with the Spider-Man film, and the connection that exists between the characters is that they all have something to relate with each other. Mm-hmm. They all are versions of a similar person. And while that maybe is a little easier than having people who are on opposite ends of the spectrum, although we do get versions of Spider-Man who aren't traditionally Spider-Man or in any regard.
Right.
Which in itself is kind of interesting. And in this world you can do that because you at least have the Spider-Man that you're used to having to a great extent, or at least close variations, and then you have So you can have those wild extremes that happened in the corner of the universe where things, went terribly wrong, or where certain decisions were made, and so that's an interesting wrinkle in this. But yeah, I don't know that Marvel has really used the multiverse in the same way that this film does. I think it was kind of, I don't want to say gimmicky, but it was less ornate, less, it doesn't feel like it was as, and I don't think exploited is quite utilized. I don't know that it was utilized quite in the way that these two films have.
Yeah.
And because I mean, multiverse should, in theory, could be a very confusing thing, but to me, they've really made it quite simple, and I think that's pretty cool. And I don't think the live action Marvel live action films have quite made it as simple and explainable. And I don't know. Like I said, I think it kind of feels still a little gimmicky in the Marvel live action films. Where here, it's organic. It's been there from the very beginning.
And it feels like the Spider-Verse is actually the underpinning.
Yeah.
Not anyone else's decisions.
Well, and again,
because if I go to work and I drive on road A instead of road B, yes, that creates a branch reality, but it's not life altering. Spider-Verse these things are critical to the survival of the multiverse.
Well, and there's part of this is, why do we keep getting these? Why have we seen, this is not addressed directly, but it's why do we keep seeing Batman's parents getting killed? Why do every version of Batman, why do we have this that happens? Or what, in every version of Spider-Man, why is it this or this? There's, very little variation. And
canon incident.
Yeah. And I think that it's an acknowledgement of that, but also, I don't want to say it's making fun of. It's not. It's smart. It's an explanation, a conversation that, well, not based in any actual facts, but if someone wanted to defend a multiverse approach, and with these canon incidents, they could do so with what this film does. It presents an argument, I guess. An argument that has really no solid answer.
Right. It's hard to rebut.
Yes, and so it presents a theory or an idea, a concept, on something that exists, and it says, okay, this is why that exists. This is why this is happening. This is why it's happened in this comic, that comic, this movie, that movie, this animated series, whatever. It wraps all that together. But there's also that sense that they're setting it up to obliterate the whole idea, that's that it has to be that way.
Yeah, and so it'll be interesting to see whether canon holds. I mean, because it in Greek mythology, it's fate.
Yeah.
You can't avoid your fate. Oedipus tried, that doesn't work. Everyone tries to avoid their fate, but you can't. No matter what you do, you wind up where you're supposed to be in some way, shape, or form. And so, and that's basically what canon incidents are in comics, and that's what they're doing. So I guess the question, the third beyond the Spider-Verse is going to answer for us is, were the Greeks right? Can you just not avoid your fate is going to happen in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not exactly the same. You might not gain or lose A, you might gain or lose B, but the net effect puts everything back on the path that it's supposed to be on. And that's an interesting, it's not an absolute, but it's a really important guide stone. And how close do you have to be to that narrative waypoint, if you will, Do you just have to be able to see it and brush by it? Can you avoid it in certain ways, but undo it in other ways, or do it in some ways? I think the third film, they've kind of set themselves up to determine whether or not that is true or not. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays. Now, at the end of this film, we see some familiar characters from the first film,
which was
awesome.
Yes, yeah, and an absolute tease.
Yes, and an absolute tease. But I'm totally in, because now we have a little bit of there's a structural rebellion in the Spider-Verse, because the Spider-Verse is maintained by the Spider-Men.
Yeah.
And so now we have conflicting ideas about what that is. And one side or the other can be right in certain ways and wrong in other ways. Like I said, there's a lot of moving parts. It's a simple idea, but there's still a lot of things that they need to address to determine how canonical canon is.
Sure.
Or how necessary canon is. Because if you said Bruce, try to build a universe where Bruce Wayne becomes Batman if his parents aren't killed.
And yes, and according to this theory,
that's the extent. Yeah, that's the fundamental question that this is kind of asking.
Yeah,
it's like you can't have a Spider-Man if Uncle Ben doesn't die, or your Uncle Ben stand-in, or Mary Jane dies, or Gwen dies, or whatever that loss is. Yeah. So it's like, can you? We're going to find that out.
Yeah. Well, and I think because the interesting aspect of that is we don't know really what they're going to say.
No,
they could go in numerous direction. I mean,
and as long as the argument makes sense, it can't be a wrong answer. But they can't just go, no, we wanted this because it's a feel-good ending.
Yeah,
I don't want a feel-good answer. I mean, I'll take a feel-good answer if it makes sense.
But it's got to make sense.
But it's got to make sense.
You got to earn it.
Yep. That's it. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse tracking to be number one, unsurprisingly, this week. Kind of surprisingly, The Boogeyman is tracking to do well for a horror movie in June.
That's great, though.
No, it is. They're saying what, like 13 million-ish, which is right around projections, which is pretty good for a horror movie in June, up against Spider-Man, still The Little Mermaid, still Fast 10. And by the way, so last night I was curious because, like I said, I took my wife to see Fast 10. And so we're sitting in there before the movie starts. Like, I'm wondering, this theater seems kind of full. So I pull up real quick, and it's like, the Spider-Man that was about to start while I was sitting there at my theater, I might have seen 10 empty seats online. But my theater for Fast 10 was probably at 70%. That's pretty good for a Friday night up against a big opening.
That's healthy. That's and then a few years ago that might not have felt as nearly as unusual. But it definitely, definitely does now. No, I think a healthy theater or a cinematic movie business or whatever allows for counter programming, allows for back in the day, there, and we won't go too far in this, but you could be number 5 one week and then rise up the charts rather than wherever your first week is, you're going to drop.
Yeah.
Which is kind of how things work now. But there was a time where you could build momentum and ride yourself up to number one. And I prefer that sort of structure, quite honestly. And I would like to see some of that maybe come back, or at least make it a little, less dependent upon that opening weekend.
Yeah.
So let's let movies, find their place, their audiences.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So that's this week. So next week, Transformers opens. I do not believe it will beat Spider-Man next week. I believe it might be number 2, but I don't think Transformers is going to beat this.
Well, and it's going to be definitely. I mean, there was a time where Transformers films were a guaranteed X amount of money.
Yep.
Whereas I think the longer the franchise went on, the more audience fatigue there was.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I point that out is because then next week, Disney Pixar Elemental, and The Flash, according to my list of release dates.
Sure. Yeah, it's getting busy. I think unnecessarily so. I think they could do a better job of separating these out a little bit. I think they're falling back onto but it has to be, summer movies do best during summer, or they've fallen back into the box that they were just starting to get out of when the pandemic hit.
Well, and then the week after that, a smaller movie, Wes Anderson, Asteroid City, which then also that should be right around the time we get Indiana Jones 5.
Indiana Jones is the end of the month, so
it'll be the 30th, so the week after that. And then 2 weeks after that 3 weeks after that right now is Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
But we're also into the Mission Impossible 7.
Yeah.
Which I heard, and Barbie, which leads me to the headline I saw that supposedly Tom Cruise is trying to get one or both of those movies to move. Barbie and Oppenheimer. Here's my thing. I don't think any of those audiences overlap. Mission Impossible, Oppenheimer, and Barbie. Those are 3 distinct audiences. I believe people will see all 3.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I would say I'm that audience.
Well, I'm excited about 2 of those. So, and the third one, we'll see how it turns out. But yeah, so now not only do you have studios jockeying, they're trying to lock down dates 2 years out by announcing that a movie will be released on this date. But I say release your movie when you want. If your movie's better, if your movie's better, it's going to win. It might not win week 1, but as you discussed, it might win week 2 and 3 and 4 after that opening week, because you might have the better movie. And it does go to that kind of dependence on opening weekend.
Yeah, well, I wish I don't have the same amount of faith in society as you do, because popularity tends to be a dominating factor in what people see these days.
Right.
And I don't know if that's because, it goes back to the whole water cooler thing. We just want to be able to talk at the water cooler about the same thing.
Yep.
But I don't know. I mean, I just wish that they could spread everything out throughout a year. Not everything has to be, released May until July, and then August through November. Right. And then, I mean, because we were getting away from that. And we kind of slid back into the old habits, which I don't think are good for movie watchers. I think that for the average person, it's a lot to ask for them to go to a movie more than once a week, and those are the people who love movies. So I think they need to figure out a way to share better.
Yeah.
If they, and it would benefit everybody.
Yeah, that's true.
There you go.
But they're trying to get their dollars. And with the production budgets on some of these, they have to get their dollars. Yeah. So it's interesting. But then you get films like The Boogeyman that don't have huge production budgets, and therefore they can, they're not worried about winning any particular week.
No,
Uh,
they just want to make a decent amount, and
yep.
I think Boogeyman has generally been well received for a horror film.
Yeah, I
It's
think
not
it
it's
has.
so I mean there's I don't know what the audience response has been, but 13 million is a nice total for that film, and if they can push that over 30, over the U.S. run, that's a really good gain.
Yeah. Wow. On IMDb, The Boogeyman is at a 6.2 out of 10 with a popularity of 70. I have
Yeah,
no idea what its Rotten Tomatoes is.
I mean that doesn't seem too far. I mean horror movies are generally down in the fours and fives.
Yeah.
Um, so I like I can live with a six.
Right.
Um, if I'm them, it might be interesting to see what the cinema score rating. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how all that stuff actually factors in.
Yeah.
We have so many barometers to
I know, right?
suggest, but then you'll have a movie that everyone hates, but still somehow made tons and tons of money.
Yep.
Um,
Well, it's
so
because
I don't
nobody
know.
knew they were going to hate it until after they paid for it.
Yeah, well, that might explain the first weekend, but
Yeah, but then
that
after
doesn't
that, it
explain.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Anyway,
Anyway, so there you go. That is Spider-Man in Across the Spider-Verse is where we're at now.
yeah.
Across the Spider-Verse. Then we'll get a Beyond of the Spider-Verse, and that should be really interesting to see what they do. I'll assume that Lord and Miller are going to write that again.
Yeah,
I don't see why they wouldn't.
I think it's in production because it comes out next year. So
Yeah, I think they kind of wrote them and were doing them at the same time, or just
yeah,
continuous production. So and good. That's how it should be. If you're gonna do it, just get in it, do them. Lord of the Rings, those bad boys.
yeah.
So it'd be interesting, but it should be. I'm looking forward to it. I want to see how this all plays out because we are left with a bit of a cliffhanger, and we'll see how that plays out at the end. So that is it for this week. I know I'm seeing 4 films this week.
I think three
Uh,
because I've already seen one of those films that you're seeing.
oh yeah. Oh, you
Good.
Joyride, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the only one. So we're seeing Transformers, Elemental, and Asteroid City this week is what I have this week. Oh, and Joyride. So
And I might be switching that up a little bit, but we'll
yeah.
see. We
Well,
can't
I
wait for this
wanted to
week.
see the Flash. I'm not seeing the Flash till the 13th. It's literally the next time I can see it.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
it's
I've
crazy.
already.
You've already seen it.
No, I haven't. No, I
Oh.
haven't. No,
Okay.
I've got a plan, is what I'm saying.
Oh, you got a plan. Okay.
I've got a
But
plan.
oh, okay, Hannibal. There you go. That's it. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Check it out. It is well worth your time if you liked the first one. And if you didn't see the first one, go watch the first one and you might be surprised. So till next time, take it easy, stay safe. I'm Mark. That is Ryan. Bye, Ryan.
See you guys.
And we'll talk to y'all later.